Chris.
Heath.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going great. I've just got to know right off the bat.
What?
Did you compose the song yourself for that intermission last time?
I don't know what song you're referring to.
Like, how much time and effort went into that song? For the listeners at home, Heath did not breathe a single word about that to me. I was just doing my pre-launch quick listen through if there are any edits I wanted to make. And then I stumbled across that at work at my desk. And at first, I hear this different jingle of music, and I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting. Then I start hearing the lyrics, and I'm like, wow, Heath went hard on this. Then I hear the second and third verse, and it's all rhymed so well. And then I start hearing the samples Heath cherry-picked of me out of context to include in there. Oh, I forgot about that. It was so good. I was laughing at my desk like a crazy person.
Well, that's high praise, but the point being that I doubt even some of our listeners know what you were talking about, because boy, did that decade segment, if you were not curious as to what was happening in 2013, I'm certain that some people scrubbed and that they might have missed. You know how I recommend the podcast titles to you. That's why I didn't make the song that nobody knows a title idea, because that's the point, is you had to have listened through it at work to have found it.
Yes, much like Easter eggs and secrets in video games, it's more meaningful to the people who do find it.
Yeah, so this is your second chance, listener, if you neglected to hear the gem that was in. I just squeezed that in at the end there of Mobius Tubes Year One. Hey, that's not too bad. The first thing I wrote was the chorus. The background track that you're wondering is a song that came out after we recorded. It was one of Silva Gunner's King for Another Day tournament tracks. So
okay,
that song was a banger, so I just had to do it.
And you did a commendable job.
Thank you.
Yeah, very, very good. It made my day.
That being said, I didn't play nearly as many games this week as I did last.
Oh, that's okay. Because we've already got a stacked schedule of things we need to get through.
Oh, we have so much.
We should mention this is episode 30 of Mobius Tubes, the end of the first full year of Mobius Tubes. We're recording this on December 15th, 2019. This will be the final episode of the year, releasing right around Christmas time. So Merry Christmas to you, Heath, and Happy Holidays to our listeners.
Merry Christmas to you, and imagine if this is somebody's first time tuning in. Yeah, so the show is called Mobius Tubes, and then the email address, because we got an email this time, is mobiustubespodcast@gmail.com, and they can send us their questions there. Shall we get started?
Let's get into it with what we've been playing, abbreviated, because there's just so much stuff we have to cover.
True. I will
Do you want to take the reins?
I mean,
go for it.
Mine's super lame. I played The Escapist.
Okay.
Which, do you know what that is? It's a top-down... It might as well be Pokemon, but you're escaping from prison. It's one of those games that all of the Markipliers and the Jacksepticeye's, they all did it. They all just blazed through it as one of the many games that they Let's Played. It wasn't for me. It felt very Flash games. It felt very Newgrounds, which is to say that very rudimentary. It's point and click. Get a screwdriver from this inmate and earn enough money to buy like a shovel to dig under the fence and escape. Unremarkable as far as I'm concerned. It was a free game on the Epic Game Store, but it didn't even crack the level of quality that I got from other games through that promotion.
I see. Yeah, it's a game. It didn't ever seem like it would be up my alley, but I have heard a lot of like buzz around it. Disappointing to hear that it wasn't for you either.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it.
Fair enough. Well, they can't all be winners. We'll have plenty of winners to talk about later on in the episode.
Boy, will we.
All right, rapid fire here. I played 3 games. One was finishing up Hollow Knight. Maybe stay tuned to hear about that later.
Oh.
Moving on. The other two games I played are on opposite ends of the budget spectrum and also on opposite ends of the general mindshare spectrum. I've been playing a Call of Duty game.
Oh.
And
What?
And also a little indie called Thomas Was Alone.
I've heard, yeah.
Let's start with Thomas Was Alone, a 2012 indie game. This is from one of those single-man dev teams, like the Toby Foxes or the Lucas Popes of the world.
Yep.
This guy, his name is Mike Bithell. I've played one of his other games, Subsurface Circular, which is like robotic detective on a subway game. Very good. But anyway, we're talking about Thomas Was Alone.
Yes,
here.
the game that the thumbnail for is off-kilter text and then multicolored strip.
Yeah, that multicolored strip is probably one of the very flat shapes that you play as in this game. It's a puzzle platformer, 2D. You play as a bunch of different shapes. You've got everything from various sized rectangles to squares.
Boy, how exciting. Wait,
yeah.
Can I play as a trapezoid, Chris?
Actually, zero trapezoids. Those maybe they're DLC.
0 out of 10.
How do I sell people on this game? Because
it's
obviously
like a walking simulator.
I mean, you're never in the first person. You're never walking around.
No, you're a square.
It's all just like picture the limbo perspective, except instead of this moody atmosphere, it's just geometry shapes. And it's very short. It took me like 3.5 hours to finish. It was a really fun time. The conceit here is that these shapes are all imbued with a personality by the narrator. The first shape you play as, this rectangle named Thomas, he starts off alone. The first shape he meets is a square named Chris. Chris initially hates Thomas because Thomas can jump higher than him. And
I too hate people for the same reason.
It was particularly amusing to me because my name is Chris and I have a brother named Thomas, and he too can jump higher than me. So this felt surreally autobiographical. Moving on, you'll encounter a whole cast of shapes. The narrator fleshes out the relationships between them. It's all kind of charming and cute. The puzzles themselves, pretty darn easy. Like usually I have to Alt-tab out of a puzzle game every once in a while and look for a solution because I get too frustrated. Only had to do that a total of once across the entire game. And even when I did it, I was like, oh, I should have been able to figure that one out. So none of these solutions were unfair or cheap. Overall, I'd call the puzzles just above the clever threshold, except for one that I would have actually stood up and applauded. It was a really cool concept.
Oh, wow.
Fun gravity stuff going on that I would not have been able to imagine in my wildest dreams.
Limbo had fun gravity stuff too.
True. And last but not least, the soundtrack is this techno beat kind of thing. It's pretty good. Yeah, I was like nodding my head along to the soundtrack. It was definitely enjoyable. So it was basically just a universally positive experience. I really liked my time with Thomas Alone, short as it was. And that brings us to the other game I've been playing, which was Call of Duty World War II, actually.
Yeah.
So I haven't played a COD game in 6 years now. I figured it was time to dip my toes back in the water, see where the franchise is these days. Although this game is already... Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say 6 years seems like a really long time, but also not, because the last good COD game came out, as we reported last time, like early in the decade.
Yeah. And actually, my math is off. I think it's been 7 years. It was 2012 the last time I was playing a COD game.
My goodness.
Anywho, World War II came out a couple years ago. I'm just playing the campaign. I'm not a multiplayer guy. And yeah, it's definitely Call of Duty with some tweaks to it.
Yeah, so this has health management.
That was the first thing I was going to say. Your health does not regenerate.
Isn't that refreshing but also frustrating?
I like it. I like the resource management of managing your medkits and scavenging the environment for them. There's also this added thing I've never seen before, squad abilities. If you perform a certain number of heroic actions, which is like saving people or taking hostages, because the Germans will sometimes surrender and you have to point your gun at them and they'll kneel down and you'll You'll take prisoners. If you do enough heroic actions, certain squad members on your team will be able to give you like a unique benefit. One guy, he'll throw you medkits. Another guy will throw you ammo. A third guy will be able to like spot and highlight enemies for you. You'll have access to multiple of these, so it's kind of up to you which benefits you want to receive. And they all have their own different cooldowns.
How very Dead by Daylight.
That has squad abilities?
Well, the first thing you said about performing heroic actions, you know, in that game, it's not necessarily the person who escapes earns the most points. If you're like deliberately putting yourself in harm's way and rescuing your fellow teammates, because there's 4 of you against the killer, your score will go up in according to your altruism. The longer you are engaged in a pursuit by the killer, that's more time that your teammates have to accomplish objectives. So like your score is going up all that time. And then you were saying like your squad mates have their own little benefits to you. I mean, yeah, there's also healing specializations that your teammates can have a Dead by Daylight. So yeah, this piques my interest for like a Call of Duty campaign.
Yeah, I have more to say about it.
Yeah.
Just briefly, this is my first time playing a COD game on the PC. It's always felt very right at home on a controller to me. Of the console-based first-person shooters, it's probably one of the best feeling ones. On the PC, similarly feels great. I feel like my headshot percentage must have gone up because I'm just cranking those out.
Oh yeah?
Especially, yes, it's to the point where if I pick up an automatic weapon, I quickly try to discard it in favor of like an M1 carbine or a sniper, something that's more precision based, because those headshots are just very satisfying and very easy with the keyboard and mouse. Yeah, it's been just like a big blockbuster, big budget shooter so far with one standout mission. Last thing I'm going to say, there's a mission called Liberation, which appropriately deals with like the liberation of Paris from the Nazi regime. It starts off, you're playing as a member of the French resistance, a woman.
Oh, yes, I have played this.
Oh, okay.
You play as Rousseau. Wait, what's her name? Yeah.
That might be her name, actually.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell it. You play a female spy dressed as a Nazi officer attending some gala, right? And you get briefed in the car, and it's like, oh, your name is Herkenferken, and you're from Hamburg, and you're here to see Colonel Schwarkenborken, and then the code word is like a poem.
I believe so.
Yeah. And you're literally just going through this Nazi party up to officers, and it's these skill checks that are like, do you know which way the wind blows? And he's like, what the f***? Let me see your papers. And then you have to, where are you from? And then it's like, oh, Berlin, Hamburg, Oslo. You have to guess correctly, otherwise you die.
Right, you had to actually memorize your information to keep up your disguise. And yeah, although it's really rudimentary and pretty like basic, but it's cool to see like some light social stealth going on in a Call of Duty game.
Yeah.
That's like, I've never seen anything like that in one of these campaigns. But that's only the first third of the mission, because once you successfully complete your mission and blow up the gates to this Nazi garrison, you then transition to the American forces, who are then storming through the gates. And it's this like assaulting the fortress type of gameplay, of which you're like dodging behind cover and trying to quickly push and make ground. And eventually you do capture the garrison, and at that point they flip the script on you, and the Nazis launch a counterattack, and suddenly you're taking on the role of the defender of the garrison, and suddenly the Nazis who are rushing up the defenses, you yourself were just behind, you're trying to prevent them from gaining ground. You get to view every different perspective of this conflict, and yeah, it had a great pacing to it. It was a fantastic level.
Yeah, the subterfuge female section was remarkable, and the fact that I don't even remember the part where you switch over to the Americans. Wasn't there also a mission where a train derails?
Yeah, you have to take out like a heavily fortified fortress of a train.
Dude, when the train derails, isn't it the most like Michael Bay, you know, like knocking over a water tower? And it's literally just put the controller down and watch the, like all the debris narrowly miss you. I was watching somebody play that for the first time, and they were just blown away by how stupid it was.
A dozen train cars land crashing down like in a perfect circle right around your player character.
And you live.
Yeah. You're unscathed. So you've played this game, Heath.
Seth bought it. It was like the last, I think it was one of the few Call of Duty games that he bought because I stopped buying them. And I did not play through the whole thing. I played through enough missions to know about the health system and know about the spy portion. I think he might have put that in my hands. So good on him.
Gotcha. Well, I'm planning on seeing it through, and I'll report back with any cool things at the finale. But that's all I've been playing the past couple of weeks.
Yay.
All right. Then we're going to take our first break, and we'll come back with all sorts of news related to the Game Awards. We'll see you then.
Chris, we're back. Did I get destroyed by the Game Awards?
I think it's fair to say we both got blown up pretty badly. To give the viewers how it went, we were getting things wrong left and right. I developed a 3-guess lead on you pretty early on. Then, right at the end, you got 3 correct in quick succession and tied it all up going into the GOTY Award. We had an equal number of correct predictions. And it was at that point where, much to the shock and awe of listeners around the globe, it was revealed that Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice was the Game Awards Game of the Year this year.
Yeah. I mean, good for them. It's basically just an award for Bloodborne as well, just to give them credit for that.
Right, because From Software, they make Game of the Year quality games, but they haven't ever gotten that kind of recognition before, right?
To my knowledge, yeah.
Right, to my knowledge. We don't quite have the viewership statistics yet. We're still waiting on that.
That was going to be like the first thing I asked.
I would expect them to go up sometime in the next week. We will bring that information to the next episode as an addendum. However, I'm currently up by 2 predictions, so even if Heath gets the win on viewership, I would have snagged the actual overall victory by 1.
All right, time to find out what I'm playing.
So, Heath, we have to assign each other some homework for the next year, 2020.
Yeah.
We've both selected 3 games for the other person to choose from. I think we've decided playing to the credits is not required, but you have to give them a fair shake. Which I don't. Fair shake is kind of arbitrary. I would assume at least like 5 hours of gameplay before you can drop
enough to have like a 1,000-word essay.
Yeah. So if you play the first 30 seconds of one of my games and that gives you enough to talk about for an 1,000-word essay, that would be sufficient.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Anyway, why don't you go for?
No, you go first because I got to play 2 of these.
Okay. All right. Here are your options, Heath. First up, this is actually a double deal for you right now because playing either of these will fulfill the requirement. I've given you the choice between Dishonored or Dishonored 2. And the reason I'm giving you both is if you want to go to the very beginning of the franchise and see how it got its start, I can't fault you for that. So you have the choice to play Dishonored. But if you want to skip to what is, in my estimation, the slightly better game with some really standout levels, I can't fault you for that either. So you can skip right to Dishonored 2 if you are so inclined. Either one will fulfill the category.
All right, so yeah, no surprise there. I assume that I will be playing it as part of this.
Okay.
I think I'm gonna jump to 2 just because I've played enough Dishonored. Like I know how it starts with like Princess Peach getting captured. I've played enough to know about like whale oil.
Yeah,
but I think I'll be able to give 2 a shot first, and then if that piques my interest, I'll go back in time.
Very exciting. I'm hoping by the end of this, a side effect will be you'll actually know Corvo Atano's name. Moving on, your second choice of the year, Yeah, this is basically just the quintessential Chris games. I was trying to be clever about it, but I couldn't justify it.
I'm kind of clever with mine, so don't worry.
Okay. Nier Automata is your second choice.
Oh, boy. Chris.
I want your hot takes so badly. This is a game I think you could have a lot of fun criticizing, and also a lot of fun with the really cool moments. And I want to hear that on the podcast. I want to vicariously relive this game through your experience. So I put it on the list as an option for you.
It is a good option for me because I only really tangentially know about like the robot carrying water and like a little this cannot continue. It's as novel to me as Shadow of the Colossus. I'm not really sure what goes on in that game. So definitely an interesting choice. What's the next quintessential Chris game? Like The Witcher?
Those first two came to me right away. I knew they were a lock on this list.
Okay.
I really struggled with what to put on for third. I considered Yakuza just because you seem to be very amused by those games, but they're also like very Japanese. There's no English voice acting in them. I didn't know if you could be on board for that.
Right. And
so I did not pick Yakuza. I thought, oh man, Heath really liked Transistor this year. Maybe I'd throw him Bastion or Pyre. But no, I didn't necessarily need your take on those games. So yeah, you guessed it. The Witcher 3 is your final choice. I don't expect you to finish this game if you do select it. But man, how much fun would it be? You bring my favorite game to the podcast and you just hate it. You tear into it. I would be a smoldering wreck afterwards.
I
want to see what that would be like. So those are your three choices, Heath. Dishonored or its sequel, Nier Automata, and The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt.
I mean, to be fair, these are all great games that I have no reason having not played as a video game public person. So yeah, these were no-brainers. And there's a no-brainer among my list for you.
Awesome. And I'm very excited to see what you have in store for me. So what do you have?
These are in order of me wanting you to play them from least to greatest.
Okay.
First, I have Planet Zoo. This is from the makers of Zoo Tycoon. This is a sim game in which you are constructing habitats and managing your zoo and making sure that the animals live authentic and comfortable lives. And you're constructing, it's like a City Skylines, but for the penguin exhibit. So there's,
if I may,
yeah.
Is this a game you've played?
No, it's not. It's actually
okay.
It'd be like you be my guinea pig, and then you'd report back, and I might introduce it to Bailey because that's up her alley. So there's that game. The second one, which is very similar to the kind of games that you were recommending me, Chris, I assigned Fallout 4 as one of the games that you ought to play. Because my goodness, that was in the top half of my games of the year for 2018, and you've still not played it. It was at the forefront of what made 2015 great.
That would be a pretty good choice for me. It is sitting in my Steam library with like 60 minutes played. So this could be the incentive I need to dive back in.
Yeah, what are you waiting for? And then the last game that I wanted you to play is an indie game that you have never heard of.
Okay.
It's called The Fall. It is a side-scrolling 2D third-person shooter in which you play as not mech suit, but the AI system. It's very Nier Automata. The AI system for this hazard suit. It's very sci-fi if you're looking at it. Your pilot is unconscious after going through a fall. And it's up to you as the emergency thing to override the motor functions and get your pilot to safety. Like I said, it's very Nier. It's very like Soma.
Okay.
And I think you would have lots of praise for it if you were to play it. Basically, it's either Fallout or The Fall.
You're right on the money there. Yeah, sorry, Zoo Tycoon or
Planet Zoo.
Planet Zoo. Yeah, your comparisons to The Fall are very apt, it would seem, because I'm on the Steam page right now, and there's a little section that says, "Is this game relevant to you? Similar to games you've played, like Soma and Nier Automata."
Are you serious? I did not check those.
Yeah, that's exactly what it says.
Off the dome. Wow.
How did you hear about this game, Heath? Because you're right, I am not familiar with The Fall.
Super best friends. Willie played it.
Okay. It's giving me another indie game vibes called The Swapper, which looks similar, and I played that one. But The Fall seems very interesting.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, I'm going to have to mull this over a bit and decide which one I want to play.
Yeah.
Good choices, Heath.
As with you. I mean, of course.
So, let's maybe talk a little bit more about the Game Awards, its announcements, and just the show in general.
Yeah, the
show. Do you have any high-level observations?
I mean, the show in general was kind of whack.
I agree.
It was definitely not to the caliber of last year's show.
I had some qualms with the editing choices they made. They had this recurring segment called Global Gaming Citizens, which was pretty cool. They were highlighting this indie game developer from Africa making a game about the experience of a refugee. And then it hard cut to like Mortal Kombat 11 ads showing fatalities and like very gory violence. So there was some very, like, you can have both of those things in the same show, but you don't hard cut in between them. It was so it was tonal whiplash for me. Also, some of the presenters some of them were really good. Some of them were a little cringy in my opinion.
Yeah.
I saw Elon Musk in the crowd. That was kind of cool.
That was super cool because he took a photo afterwards with Todd Howard and who's the other guy? Shoot. But it was like, look at all these cool people in the same photo.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about Elon Musk. I think he was there to support his girlfriend, who was a performer in the Cyberpunk musical number. But I have also seen him tweeting like artwork of Nier Automata, so I think he plays games too.
Elon's super cool. He's so with it, despite being a billionaire.
Yeah. Also, I feel like he's probably working like 80-hour weeks. So where does he find the time?
Yeah.
But anyway, as far as the actual awards went, who could have possibly predicted the Disco Elysium sweep?
Dude, you know what that felt like?
What?
It felt like I was a girl at school who was like one of the Populinas, and I see like another girl across the room, and people are like giving her attention. I'm like, she's not that pretty. And then she goes ahead and wins like every like homecoming queen. And I'm just like, That's what it felt like.
Yeah. Disco Elysium won 4 awards, more than any other game at the show. It won every single category it was up for nomination in. It was undefeated. Like, wow.
I couldn't have predicted that.
Death Stranding did win 3 if you include performance and Matt Mikkelsen winning that. Because it also took Best Direction and Best Soundtrack. That seemed a bit fishy to me.
I mean, it's just for like...
Because it's...
the vocals?
It's a bunch of licensed music, right?
Yeah.
Death Stranding has a phenomenal selection of licensed soundtracks and how it uses it, but I feel like you give the nod to some original scores in the best music, not music that exists elsewhere. In hindsight, I should have been able to see Beat Saber winning Best VR AR game. It just threw me off that it was in that same category last year. But that's the VR game most people like talk about, right? Of course it would win. And I also should have been able to see the Luigi's Mansion 3 winning Best Family Game. I feel like that got a lot more buzz than Super Mario Maker 2. I was kind of just riding the original Super Mario Maker hype because the first game was a big deal. The second game didn't make nearly as big a splash.
I mean, it's still like selling consoles as like a bundle.
Yeah.
but I hear what you're saying.
And the last thing of note about the actual awards to me was, wow, Resident Evil 2 didn't win anything. That seems kind of like a snub to me.
That was kind of a snub. Yeah, it was deserving of something. Even with the company it was in. It got snubbed.
Overall, I'd say it was the right games won the right awards, I would say. What was interesting was they put this 100% fan-voted category called the Player's Voice, where there was like this tournament bracket of games, and the fans themselves could vote on what they thought the game of the year should be.
There were 4 to choose from, right?
In the final round, there were 4 to choose from.
Oh, in the final round.
I believe they were. Yeah, because it was a bracket-style thing. It started with 26 games.
Oh my gosh.
In the final round, it was Death Stranding, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, which was actually after the cutoff date. Otherwise, we would have probably seen it pop up more in the actual awards. Fire Emblem Three Houses, and of course, it was Smash Bros. Ultimate.
Oh, of course. Wow.
Which took second place.
Yeah.
But winning with 45% of the vote was actually Fire Emblem Three Houses.
Substantial.
Which made me feel
validated.
Oh, so validated. Yeah. Because that wasn't even nominated for Game of the Year. But it's a weird intersection of both popularity for the fan vote and also which fan base is the most passionate. Because Smash Bros. Sold way more than Fire Emblem, but Fire Emblem attracts the kind of people who are going to sign up for a Game Awards category and vote.
True. That's a good distinction.
It kind of fosters this cult-like passion of which I am an example of. Should we talk about the announcements of the show, Heath?
I mean, there weren't many.
There was a pretty big announcement that didn't have a lot of oomph behind it. And that was the fact they showed what the next Xbox looks like.
Oh, yeah. You want to talk about the Xbox X?
The Xbox Series X, as it's called, which is... Oof, Microsoft and your names. You had the X Bone, and now you've got the Xbox X.
I saw a tweet that's like, in Japan, they're calling it the X because Series sounds like shitty in Japanese, which means like defecation, I think.
Interesting. So this thing, it looks like a PC tower, basically.
Yeah, really weird.
Very weird. And they say holiday 2020 and didn't give us much more to go on other than that. But we now know we've seen it. We know what the future is. We can practically taste it at this point.
Haven't leaked photos of the PS5 looked kind of like nothing we've seen before as well?
I think you're talking about the V-shaped PS5, which it's not the actual retail console, it's the development kits, what the developers are using to make their games. So, having it be the 5 and having it shaped in the Roman numeral for 5, a V, is kind of cool, but I would not want a V-shaped console in my house. That seems very inconvenient.
I think so too. Consoles are not meant to be like centerpieces. They're meant to be the powerhouse of the cell.
Yeah, it should just be pretty utilitarian and be able to be slotted anywhere in your entertainment shelf. Anyway, that was probably the most headline-grabbing announcement. There were 3 actual game announcements of note that I thought were cool. Let's just blaze through them. In third place, congratulations, Heath. You can now start butchering another game's subtitle because there's a Hellblade sequel coming out. No, it's not Senua's Song. This one is going to be called Senua's Saga.
Oh, I like that.
It looked really cool. Visually beautiful, because the first one was really pretty too. But Ninja Theory, the developers, they were still indie when they made the first one, and now they've got Microsoft bucks behind it, and it looks even better.
Okay.
And it was confirmed as a game for the Xbox Series X.
Exclusive. Okay.
So we've got that to look forward to. Most surprising announcement, to me anyway, is The Wolf Among Us coming back from the dead.
Telltale is alive.
Yeah. we heard about Telltale being reincarnated a few months back under like completely different people. So it's not even the same company, not even close.
The way of Atari.
Right. And now the Wolf Among Us 2 is finally being put back in development. And after the big cliffhanger of the first game, what a relief, because it was looking like we would never see that story continue.
Yeah. Did you play Wolf Among Us?
I did, yeah.
Okay, I watched all of it.
It's probably my second favorite Telltale game. I like it a lot.
That makes a lot of sense. It's a pretty gripping story. I remember how, didn't I see like Little Red Riding Hood as the antagonist? And it was always super interesting to know when Big B would Hulk out. But
yeah.
I hope that this game is better, because that what really kills me for Telltale games is always how at the end of a cutscene in the beginning of gameplay section, it always kind of throttles and it kind of stutters a little bit. Universally.
Performance issues all the time, because these are games that they port to even things as low as like a mobile phone. So they're not building these games from the ground up to be console games necessarily, which would make you think actually that they would run really well on a console since they can run on mobile platforms, but that's just not the case. The last thing of note
was
to me,
the Fast and Furious thing that looked like a PS2 game.
Vin Diesel was on stage for that.
Awful.
Yeah.
Awful.
The error that occurred there was that was the final announcement of the show. It almost seems like they had a closer that backed out or something, because that had no weight behind it. So that was unfortunate. The last thing that was super duper up my alley was Weird West from Dishonored and Prey developers. So I guess these guys left Arcane Studios, formed their own new indie studio, and they're making this. So picture...
I was going to say, you're going to have to give me some reference. So Diablo?
Picture an isometric action RPG. Now, give it a Wild West paint job.
All right.
So it looks like Red Dead from the Diablo perspective.
Like Red Dead?
Just because it's Wild West.
It's, okay, themed, yeah.
And then throw in strange cults and demonic entities out in the wild.
Oh.
So they're playing up the Dishonored and Prey influences. So I'm assuming there's going to be like lots of branching gameplay styles you can choose from. And then a different perspective. That's interesting. Really cool theme. This is checking all of my boxes, and I'm so excited for it. It had like a great narration over the trailer, cool music. Yeah, I am so sold.
I'll have to take a look at this again because it sounds fun. Fantasy Western isometric. Yeah, that checks all the boxes.
So those were the standouts to me from the Game Awards. Anything I omitted, Heath, or any closing remarks?
No. I mean, Jeff Keighley tweeted because someone was like, hey, Jeff, what the heck? There wasn't any big thing that I was excited for. And he's like, well, I'd like to end the show with the game of the year. So that's why it kind of flatlined at the end. I understand where Jeff is coming from. He's still like our Pope, but I really hope that next year's Game Awards turns it around.
I think that's a pretty good response from Jeff. I was kind of almost amused by Sekiro was announced as the game of the year, and then the show wrapped up like immediately. There was no falling action. There was no denouement. It was just over.
Yeah, I would have thought that someone would be like, and now to play us out is a duet between Elon Musk's girlfriend and Miyamoto.
Green Day.
Oh, Green Day. Gosh, I saw a thing that was like a drinking game is take a shot every time they promote Green Day.
Every time Jeff Keighley says Green Day. Yeah, he said it so many times.
Yeah.
So that's a wrap. The Game Awards 2019 is now in the record book.
We are still waiting for the viewership statistics.
we will check in on that, and then we will eagerly await the return of the awards in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And so without further ado, we will take another break. And when we come back, Heath and I will tell you all about our 10 favorite games we played in the past year. We'll see you then.
Chris, I am happy to report that I have played all of the games on my top 10 games list. That was not something that I could have said last year.
What? Really?
No, remember how like I included games that I just simply watched, and it was basically the ones that gave me the most enjoyment by whatever avenue they got to me. But these games I've all played.
So your game playing has increased substantially this year.
I mean, yeah, if you've been listening.
Right. Yeah, mine was very steady. Like I played almost exactly the same number of games as this year. Last year, we had just started the podcast late in the year, so I had this advantage of many of my top 10 games I hadn't talked about on the podcast at all. Well, this year, I've talked about all of these pretty extensively, so I struggle to come up with new things to say, which I think I've done an okay job doing. What about you?
I'm in the same boat. There are maybe 2 games on my list that you might have forgotten about.
Okay, yeah. Also, what was unique to last year was I had no idea what was going to show up on your list. This year, I'd like to think I have a decent idea. I'm holding out for some I'm hopeful I see towards the top. I have my own like running game going in my head of what your list looks like.
You would be able to guess more than half, but not in the correct order?
Yes, that's actually a point I wanted to make. When you bring games to talk about on the show, I get kind of a binary sense of whether you liked it or not. But I feel like I'm way more likely to gush about the games I love than you are. I don't really know what your hierarchy is out of the games you like.
Well, I mean, you're about to hear one hierarchy, but I'm not quite sure what you mean by what you just said. How I'm more ambiguous about my favorites.
At least how I interpret the games you talk about. I feel like your praise is
always
a lot more
tepid?
level-headed. It's a lot, less enthusiastic, more like this cool explanation of certain aspects of a game and what you took away. You always like find a silver lining of what you really like about a game and present it in a positive light.
All right.
Maybe
I'll take your
I'm
word
alone
for
in this.
it. This is very diagnostic what you're doing. It's too early for us to have impersonations, I think, as like just public people. Oh, did I mention that Harmontown ended? Dan Harmon's podcast? Yeah, it had gone on for 7 years and it ended this month. And there was a fan that came up on stage and did his impersonation of Dan Harmon, and it was very spot on. It was one word that gave me a good feeling. But yeah, the show is over.
Sad to hear that.
Yeah, more than a few podcasts that I listened to have just died. But funny to hear you critique what appeals
critiques
to me. You think that's exclusive to video games, or am I like, this pomegranate, silver lining?
No, I would say your silver lining approach is exclusive to video games.
I don't know who I am anymore. All right, you want to know what number 10 is?
No, just the opening thing. Unlike most podcasts you may listen to where they run down their top 10 games of 2019.
What are we not doing?
Heath and I haven't played 10 2019 releases. So what we do is we're talking about the 10 games we like the most that we actually played this year. They could have released any year. So that's the explanation behind that. This is just an arbitrary requirement I put for the games on my list. I said I had to have finished them, so incomplete games were not eligible. And also the game had to be new to me this year. So if I was doing my 10th replay of The Witcher 3, that would not qualify.
Right.
It had to be like a fresh game for me.
Right. Bailey and I, because Detroit Become Humans out on PC now.
Yeah.
We intend to play that fully, and I'd be cheating if I put that on this one.
Got it. Yeah, so without further ado, Heath, I'm interested to hear what your number 10 is.
It's Fortnite, because like you said, it was new to me, and I saw the appeal. It was worth my time, and boy, was I just filled with childhood delight when I got my first victory. If I sunk a lot of time into it, I could probably just churn out wins. The skill ceiling is very high, and to the game's credit. I'm never going to be a whiz at building.
The people who have that knack for building, like, blow me away. That is like some complicated stuff.
Yeah, they turned it into like a whole different game. The way they can like accurately whip the mouse around and just create a staircase Jenga tower.
Yeah. All right.
What's your number 10?
I completed 25 games that were new to me this year. So that's the pool I'm pulling from.
Good statistic. I completed fewer?
We'd have to check the record book. I don't know. But at my number 10, a late entry is Devil May Cry 5. I struggled between putting this one or Bayonetta 2. They are neck and neck. But Devil May Cry 5 gets the edge in my book. The biggest praise I can give the game is that every time a combat encounter would end, I would think to myself, ooh, I wish that lasted just a little bit longer. Or every time one of those very brief interstitial sections of just walking down the corridor that like take 30 seconds to get to the next fight, I just wish, ooh, I wish I was in combat right now instead. The combat just feels that good to engage with. Yeah, it's just that satisfying to interact with on a fundamental mechanical level. They nailed it. They nailed it all so well. Devil May Cry 5 could be many different types of games to you. What it was to me was just an excellent weekend game. I blitzed through it in like 3 or 4 days tops. It was really short. You can complete the game in that very brief amount of time. But you could also like do a deep dive on Devil May Cry 5 because there's this robust New Game Plus with like a whole bunch of difficulty settings. There's the Bloody Palace, which I did dip into actually, Heath. It's this like, it's a wave-based survival mode where like the waves get harder and harder. You pick which character you want to play. I think there's 50 waves per character you can complete. And then there's like supply replenishment waves after like every 10 or so where you can like grab some health and items to help you in the future fights. And they just kept progressively and incrementally more difficult. And yeah, I mean, Devil May Cry 5, for all of its flashy cutscenes and ridiculousness, could have just been a big room with enemies in it. With a combat system this good, it would have justified itself in my eyes. It's just that much fun to play on the combat level alone. So yeah, that was my number 10.
Yay! Wow, number 10. And that's a good game. So I'm eager to hear what the rest of your list is.
Sure thing.
My number 9 is Minute, the 60-second indie adventure game that I've like been familiar with for the whole time, and I only just played it in October, I think. I really enjoyed it enough to put it on the list, and it's a game I would recommend as just like having it in addition to the novelty. It was fun enough to make it to the end. Yeah, that's like these Clockwork games. I fancy them in particular.
Got it. Yeah, that's one I would not have expected to see on your top 10 list, actually.
You thought I was lukewarm on it?
I thought you were lukewarm on it, yeah.
I mean, it's only number 9.
Okay. Fair. My number 9 is The Banner Saga 3.
Yay.
What I'll say is they did it. They nailed the landing. It was such a solid send-off to what I would call like an underappreciated series. I said it had a very oppressive atmosphere to it, and I would like glance at its Steam page and like sneak away and like hide and not launch the game sometimes because I just wasn't in the right headspace to dive in there.
Yeah, you were conditioned, negatively reinforced.
Yeah, it's punishing. When it comes to the game's narrative, there were at least 2 or 3 decisions I was faced with where I read it over. I said, wow, I can really see both sides here. And then I exited the game and walked away because I just had to mull it over. I couldn't make a snap decision. It was too nuanced of implications to decide right then and there. I had to think it over.
Really?
Yeah. What I will say is, I feel like the Banner Saga 1 got some hype behind it. I haven't seen nearly the discussion around either of its sequels. I would implore anyone, if you even slightly enjoy tactical strategy RPGs, give the Banner Saga a shake. I think it's really quite special. They're fairly short by RPG standards, but they don't compromise on like the density or the decision making. It's all there in a fairly brief package. I implore you, give the Banner Saga a try if this at all sounds like it could be your cup of tea.
Yay. I half expected it maybe being on your game requests.
Okay. I mean, I considered it.
Is Nier on the PC?
It is, yes.
Oh, okay. Because maybe, yeah.
It has a Steam page. I think there is this fan-made mod that you might want to install if you were to choose Nier on the PC that just helps with like resolution stuff, maybe. I feel like for some weird reason, Square Enix made the PC version of Nier Automata not run at 1080p, and there's like a painless mod you can install that will bump it up to 1080p. gotta get that boop it. Oh wow, title. Bump it up.
Yep.
Yeah. So just keep that in mind if you decide to go down the Nier path.
Okay. Banner Saga 3. My number 8 on the list. It would have made more sense maybe if this one was number 9. Tetris 99. This is a game I played in February. You probably forgot about it. It was my first Battle Royale game. It is definitely the kind of game that if I ever did like an AMA, you know, like Reddit AMAs?
Yeah. Ask me anything.
Yeah, and then there's like casual hangouts for like live streams and stuff. It's definitely the kind of game that if maybe I watched the Game Awards with a live audience and we were all like, this kind of ended lame. All right, what do we do now, folks? Oh, here, we'll just chat while I play something. What should I play? There's 2 games that come to mind, like Tetris 99 and Civilization 5, where I can just like, you know, do something that people can follow while I engage with the chat.
You showed Tetris 99 to me, and it was at that point you realized that I am pretty bad at Tetris.
I mean, everyone kind of is if you haven't played it in a long time.
My block falling arcade game of choice is actually Luminous. I'm more of a Luminous guy.
Oh,
how hipster is that?
Who is that reference?
The Luminous fans out there. It's
what should I be picturing when you say Luminous? Because all I'm thinking of is like Lunesta with the sleep aid with the butterfly.
No. Although the sleep is kind of a fun analogy because Luminous puts me in like this trance-like state. It really gets me in the flow state, more so than Tetris was able to.
Okay.
Yeah, just look up some gameplay. It's got some great soundtracks on Luminous
Just look it up,
games.
audio listener. It's good soundtracks, you say. Ooh, nice.
That brings me to my number 8, which is Marvel's Spider-Man.
Yay.
It's a tale of 2 games, kind of, because you've got the very tightly designed, exhilarating, blockbuster-level story missions. It's kind of like a Marvel movie, basically. It's just all killer, no filler, great cutscenes, everything you'd expect from a big AAA video game. But then you've also got this plethora of little side activities you can do across the Manhattan open world.
Deliver the pizza.
And this game, more than any other this year, brought out my completionist tendencies. This is a game I felt obligated to go for the 100%. And lo and behold, I eventually did do that. Just because The side activities, they're all clearly labeled. They're all fairly brief. They're not like time intensive. And the swinging around of Manhattan, the traversal is so much fun that once you start picking off a couple, it can be hard to stop. You just keep going, mopping up this checklist across New York City. And yeah, that was the perfect opportunity for me to like listen to podcasts while playing a game, which I occasionally like to do. It's kind of like this veg out state I'm occasionally guilty of indulging in. And Marvel Spider-Man was the game most well suited to listening to a podcast that I played all this year. I had a great memory of just swinging around, mopping up randomly generated crimes in Spider-Man while listening to the Giant Bombcast's year in review of, I think it was 2017. So I always like painfully delay the year in reviews until I've like played of most of what I wanted to play that year to avoid any spoilers. So yeah, it was a great time, especially because I like 2017 quite a lot. So it was a fun trip down memory lane. And yeah, those are all the fun experiences I have associated with Marvel's Spider-Man this year. And this version of Peter Parker, I really liked him. He's just super charming.
Hats off to Yuri Lowenthal. Let's just talk about launch titles for a second, because Breath of the Wild on the Switch was a huge selling point when it first came out. And then I don't even remember other game launch titles, but damn if PS5 doesn't have the Marvel Spider-Man sequel as a launch title, because that game will sell consoles. It's going to be a sure hit. Excited for that. And then you mentioned Giant Bombcast. I am the biggest Giant Bombcast fan that has never listened to an episode, because it's all the best friends reference. So it's a degree of separation, but I'm certain that I have quoted something that they have quoted.
I'm actually not the biggest Giant Bombcast fan. I don't particularly enjoy the regular episodes, but I love their year in review segments. So I pop in once a year for those alone. If you want the Chris Armchair predictions, I'm going to say Spider-Man 2 is a 2021 game, so it's going to miss the launch of the PS5. Expect to see Heath's favorite game, Horizon Zero Dawn 2, as a launch title instead.
Oh, no. What if they did like Horizon 1 Dawn?
Oh, that would be very funny. Yeah.
That'd be so stupid. Okay, that's your prediction? Nah. Yeah, I got nothing else down the pipeline to contend with that. Okay, well,
what's your number 7 game, Heath?
It was Smash. It was Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. And your first thought is, wow, Heath, that's relatively low on your top 10 list. Well, it was the Christmas gift, because I got my Switch for Christmas last year. It was the Christmas gift to get. And wait, didn't I put Smash on my 2018 list?
I think you did, although I think it placed higher.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so interesting. It's on my list here because it was still novel to me this year, I guess you could say. Me trying to get my Captain Falcon's GSP up, trying to compete in online. It was a game that, brought my roommates together when I moved down to Florida from January to May. It would have placed higher if it had a single player campaign like Subspace Emissary, but I think it deserves a spot on the 2019 top 10 list just for its staying power. It's not going to go away. I'm still eagerly awaiting the last character.
Right, and it's not even going to be the last character. Sakurai said they're going to bring more after the first season of Smash Bros. Characters. So this is like an endless game. It's just continuously supported.
I'll believe it when I see it. I feel like Sakurai is going above and beyond, and I don't want to risk him burning out even more than he already has.
I'm sure he has the stamina of a marathon runner. Most people would have burned out by now, but he's still going strong.
Yeah, he's huge. Anyway, so Smash was 7.
So, my number 7, continuing on the open world segment of my list, is The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild.
At number 7?
Yeah, so,
Ooh.
Chris, how could you put this generation-defining game, this new high watermark of open world game design, as low as number 7 on your list? And I'll say, yeah, you've got a good point there. It was rough waters at first for me with Breath of the Wild. It took me a while to get into it. It was just such a foreign concept to me. Not this cookie cutter copy and paste open world checklist kind of game. It was actually exploration was like the main selling point, not the combat. It was the excellent Portal-esque puzzle design, which are rivaling the best Valve can come up with. It is the sense of wonder, actual like genuine wonder you get when you find something that's just like crazy cool in this world. And there were no quest givers telling you to go there. There were no signposts pointing you in that direction. You just pick a direction that appealed to you and you find something incredible on the other side. Breath of the Wild gave me one of the best moments of the year. I'm talking about when I dropped a steel weapon I was carrying to complete a circuit.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But if you've played a lot of video games and you know how they typically work, that is a mind-boggling piece of design. That to have the systems be so cohesively designed to account for something that the player tries like that, to reward a player's intuition so thoroughly, it deserves the highest praise. And The Legend of Zelda is full of moments like that.
So why'd you put it at number 7?
Because I'll probably explain that when I get to my next game.
Boy, I hope your next game is hot garbage. It's just like Mortal Kombat.
What is your number 6, Heath?
My number 6 was Red Dead Redemption 2.
That low?
I forget you put Breath of the Wild at 7. Yeah,
I'm just giving you crap.
I mean, Red Dead 2 is that low because the other games were so high. Dude, let me tell you about the online. It's fascinating to me. So you can be... Are you familiar with the Red Dead 2 online? I mean, obviously you haven't played the game yet. You can be...
Right. I have a cursory understanding of it.
You can be a sheriff and collect bounties. You can be a bandit and rob stagecoaches. Or you can just be like a regular like merchant and complete deliveries and generate your own economy that way. Dude, Red Dead 2's online was the first Strand type game. I'm talking about Death Stranding now, where Norman Reedus is making deliveries across America and like linking up things. That's the same thing, in my opinion, as you driving sacks of flour from Armadillo to Blackwater. I really like this day in the life. You have to bring a thing from A to B. That's just the goal, and you reap the rewards of the distance traveled. That really appeals to me as like a gameplay component.
It sounds almost like a role-playing thing.
Kind of.
Do you feel like a merchant?
Immersive sim, kind of. And I watched a few videos that were like, here's how to get the most bang for your buck and if you're running a merchant run. And I was getting really kind of hype. I don't know why that role-playing aspect really appeals to me. Maybe it's kind of this Maslow's hierarchy of need. I'm manufacturing a job for me to have in the game. But still, there were moments in the single-player campaign where I'm not skipping, but relinquishing control to the cinematic camera during the exposition on horseback with Dutch as we ride to El Dorado. So, Heath, how can you go on autopilot for the horse riding in the single player, but then like really enjoy mundane deliveries in the multiplayer? And I think it has to do with, I gotta bring home the bacon in this game. I gotta rebuild America back in the 1910s. It's fascinating how both of those games have a similar conceit despite the wildly different setting.
I was expecting to see Red Dead 2 somewhere on your list. What I was not expecting was you leading with a discussion of the multiplayer. I thought the single player was like the driving force here.
I mean, yeah, I enjoyed it in its entirety. The some people have criticized the last act, but I still enjoyed that. It's a well-polished game, but maybe this is just my weird convention that I only cared about. It's like somebody only playing a game for like the soundtrack.
Yeah, some like ancillary aspect of the game.
That's a good word. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm probably going to get to it in 2020. So we will revisit this discussion next year.
Yay.
Which brings me to my number 6, which starts out with a rhetorical question.
Okay.
Heath, who wins in a clash between an unstoppable force and an immovable object? That's a paradox,
Commissioner
right?
Gordon?
No, it's a paradox. It's nearly impossible to answer. But when I was coming up with this top 10 list, I found myself facing a similar conundrum. Because The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is the unstoppable force, but the immovable object is Assassin's Creed Origins. What I was faced with was, how do I compare the utterly fresh and unique take on open world game design found in Breath of the Wild to
versus the
familiar
iterative,
yet impeccably executed design of Assassin's Creed Origins, which is so far up my alley, I lost sight of it. Like, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, its strengths are not necessarily what I'm looking for to get out of my open world games, but Assassin's Creed Origins sure as hell are. And as you may have already guessed, I've given the edge to AC Origins here. And I accept all the flack anyone is going to give me over that choice. If one of these two games has more potential to be the big influential game going forward, it's without a doubt Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
But Assassin's Creed Origins has a bunch of merits on its own. Like, Egypt is absolutely gorgeous. It actually has like a real story in here, although maybe not the most worthy of praise, but I've got to give the narrative edge to AC Origins over Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild is kind of lame.
Yeah, Breath of the Wild, the story is not important.
When I'm playing a big open world game, give me the progression systems. AC Origins is like a perpetual progression engine. You're just constantly making progress, and it feels so good. So AC games, they always have like camps or bases for you to take out and infiltrate. And when that gets applied to an open world, it just becomes 10 times better. I
mean, that's where they're found, right?
Yeah, the camp takeovers in AC Origins are the best they've ever been in this series. I dabbled with Metal Gear Solid 5, and it wasn't my cup of tea.
Yeah.
But I finally get it in AC Origins. When you're like stalking the perimeter of a base and you're planning out the path you're going to take through it, you can literally approach it from any direction. And you have your Eagle Senu to like chart a tactical game plan from your eagle eyes view. And then you try to execute it and it goes really well. Or even if it doesn't go well, suddenly you have to improvise. And what you're improvising with is a really fun combat system with range and melee options. To contrast that with Zelda, where I would actively avoid the combat because it was more of a chore.
That's why. That makes a lot of sense.
So yeah, AC Origins, as conventional as it was much more of a crisp game. It was appealing to my sensibilities. And yeah, as much as I hate to give the safer, less risky game the edge here, I just ultimately enjoyed it more and spent more time with it this year. So AC Origins is my number 6.
We've so thoroughly defined what a crisp game is. You know those Nintendo seal of quality stickers?
Yes.
You really need like a crisp seal of crispness just to stamp on things.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks.
Cut to me photoshopping it. Anyway, number 5, Return of the Obra Dinn. And I know, yeah. So, Return of the Obra Dinn, some people might have thought it was just like a meme of mine that I was super hype just because of my Game Awards prediction win and the Lucas Pope factor, maybe. But
the Lucas Pope factor.
Yeah. Just, his games I've really enjoyed. Return of the Obra Dinn makes it onto the list just because I had so much enjoyment from not cheating and relying on my own intuition to figure out. There's like 60 identities in that game, and I didn't look up anything. All the solutions had to come from me. And I think that might be inflating its score a little bit. It makes sense that it's at 5 because it was meaningful to me. And although it's not a game that I would recommend as heavily as like Breath of the Wild or Red Dead, it's going to stay with me, not to the extent like Inside or Detroit, but it was too important to not give recognition to.
Bravo on not giving in to the temptation to look up any of the solutions. I'm going to try to hold myself to that standard when I get to this game.
I'm trying to remember, like, how was I able to figure out that those two were brothers without looking it up? And I'm having trouble remembering because when did I play this? Back in like January?
No. This was like middle of the year, first half of the year, but yeah, I want to say it was like early summer or something.
I was in Florida still. But yeah, I'm trying to recall my playthrough, and there are some parts in the game where I'm like, wow, I was able to, did I brute force that? And I don't think I did.
I'm trying to recall how I was so smart when I was playing this game.
When you put it that way. It is good.
Damn, I was good. Yeah.
What did I say about it was too early to have like an impersonation of each other? Yeah, we're getting to that point, I guess.
Over the course of this very episode.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
Okay.
It beats out Red Dead and Smash, if you can believe that.
Wow. Lucas Pope, you got another hit on your hands. All right, that brings me to my number 5. And Heath, when I was coming up with this list, my top 5 were immediate locks. There was no questioning it. The bottom 5 was a little more fluid. I eventually figured it out. But to a testament to my top 5 games of this year, I took a page out of your book and actually wrote up some short essays for you.
Good. Do I hazard a guess for number 5?
Yeah, throw something out there.
Prey.
Not quite.
Okay.
The latest addition to my list is my number 5 game, Hollow Knight.
Oh, of course. Yeah, duh.
Let's dig into this. Exploring the bug kingdom of Hollow Nest was an absolute treat. Despite the game essentially, like most Metroidvanias, it's composed of a collection of rooms arranged in a grid-like pattern. That's the standard. Despite that fact, the world of Hollow Knight is among the most cohesive and fully realized I've ever encountered in a video game. It's the locations you visit that are brimming with variety and personality. Don't let the game's initial gray and somber atmosphere trick you into thinking that is all Hollow Knight has to offer. There's a lot of variety here. But having an awesome setting for a video game wouldn't amount to much if the mechanics on display for interacting with the world weren't there to back things up. Thankfully, the jumping, dashing, and slashing found in Hollow Knight are oh so satisfying. The game feel is on point. Every input you make has an immediacy to it, resulting in a feeling of complete control and agency. Even in the toughest nail boss fights, mistakes rarely, if ever, felt undeserved.
What does that mean? Why is that so hard to... Wait, so so it wasn't the game's fault. It was, hate the player. Yeah, okay.
What I mean by that is, if I ever get hit, it was because I messed up or because I was still in the process of learning the fight's patterns. Which brings me to Team Cherry has this incredible, uncanny knack for animating enemy tells and wind-up animations. I can't tell you how many times I would stumble upon a new boss fight and get absolutely stomped the first 2 or 3 attempts. But shortly thereafter, and without fail, something would click. A fight that was giving me a headache mere moments before would suddenly become borderline trivial, and I'd just breeze through it.
Oh.
I attribute this to Team Cherry designing their bosses in such a way that after every failed attempt, I would come away having organically learned just some small new technique or strategy that would make the fight easier going forward. Overcoming these excellent boss fights that initially seemed downright daunting is an amazing feeling you rarely see executed to this caliber outside of something other than like a From Software game. And then there is the narrative, which is not told to you overtly. There is this level of subtlety here that requires the player to get their hands dirty doing some detective work if they want to understand the full implications of the story. Either that, or you can look up a narrative summary on YouTube like I did. There are definitely pros and cons to this approach. On the one hand, not having everything spelled out to you created this whole layer of mystique that permeated my entire gameplay experience. But on the other hand, the actual act of playing the game only gave me like a vague notion of what was actually going on. And speaking of From Software, I had a very similar narrative experience during my playthrough of Bloodborne, complete with the YouTube story analysis binge session upon completing the game. There were some significant story parallels you can draw between the two. They each deal with this like once proud civilization that has now fallen from grace, and the various factions involved attempting to prevent the decline. It's just kind of weird that they were so similar in that regard. But despite the drawbacks, I feel this approach to storytelling actually lends itself well to this type of narrative. It gets bonus points from me because I think you would be hard-pressed to successfully adapt this style of storytelling to a different type of narrative medium. Video games are kind of uniquely suited for having a player stumble upon certain clues by themselves and then attempting to come up with their own conclusions about how they fit into the context of a larger narrative. So yeah, hats off to that respect. And just Hollow Knight didn't just become my new favorite Metroidvania game. It's also one of my new favorite video games, period. Bravo, Team Cherry. You wowed me.
Wow. Yeah, you wowed me with such high praise for number 5. That was great.
Yeah.
What you said about like the game feel. This what a perfect metric. This game has a big game feel. I mean, I was going to say, I'm more enticed to play it, but I'm really not. I've seen what it has to offer, and albeit it's impressive, it's not for me. What you said about the medium being video games allows for autonomy of the player. Yay, we're going down that route again. And for number 5, wow.
Yeah, I would never have expected to like this game as much as I did. It kind of like opened the door to me to being, wow, Metroidvanias have a lot to offer.
And it's hard. I was watching...
And it's hard.
I was watching like the Coliseum segment recently.
Yes, I could only beat the first 2 trials in the Coliseum. The third one, the Trial of the Fool, yeah, you'd be foolish to attempt that because it's tough.
Yeah. Very good.
What is your number 4 game, Heath?
It's friggin' Breath of the Wild. Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, what are you doing putting Breath of the Wild super low? Okay, so Heath, beginning of the year, he moves to Florida. He links up with his roommate. His roommate had a copy of Breath of the Wild, so he plays it all through February, March, April, and has a great time. With the exception of hunting down chickens in that one town, all of my time put into Breath of the Wild was like super fun. Had I not moved, I definitely would have gotten to the point where I could like afforded armor and reached some of the later parts of the game. I was still only like 10 hours in, but just from me, and that might be why it's so high on my list, just because, you know, I didn't sink 40 into it like Disco Elysium. But Breath of the Wild, instantly a winner, in my opinion, and boy, did I enjoy gliding around. I didn't take down one enchanted giant beast. And I didn't even get into Gerudo, the desert land.
I see.
I never even made it to Eventide Island, but boy, does all of those things, and the fact that I'm able to remember them so vividly, it's like, what a treat that game was. And it's a shame that I don't have it.
Interesting, because if I had to have judged Breath of the Wild after my first 10 hours, it would not have placed on my list. The most impressive things came later for me. So maybe if you were to revisit Breath of the Wild, your estimation of the game may only grow.
Probably, yeah. I was just getting a kick out of the Assassin's Creed towers and less so interacting with people. Like maybe like the more so the mystery. You know, there was that one the one level up statue that's like, oh, you can trade heart for stamina, and I was like, ooh, because I really wanted lots of stamina. And like that big lady, I never fulfilled her thing. So heck yeah, maybe the later parts of the game will be even more adventurous. Too bad friggin' Nintendo games never lose their value, so it's always gonna be like $40.
Right, on the low end, $40. I bet some places are still selling it for $60.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
All right, do you want to take a second stab at what might be number 4 on my list?
Prey
2017, my number 4 pick.
Mm-hmm.
You just were slightly premature there.
Yeah.
Okay. At its core, Prey is interested in finding out if you truly subscribe to the morals you claim to have.
Trolley problem.
The opening of the game literally presents you with an ethics test, complete with the iconic trolley problem, and a bunch of variations of it. Just to reiterate, if a train is on course to run over 3 people tied to the rails, would you choose to flip a switch if it would divert the train and cause it to run over 1 person instead?
Heck yeah.
Yeah, most people say yes, and it makes perfect sense. People have the noble intention of trying to minimize the amount of harm being committed. But once Prey properly begins, it goes to great lengths to demonstrate to its players exactly how much ambiguity, moral gray area, and room for doubt actually exist in posing such a question. The good of the many trumping the good of the few is exactly the line of reasoning that can send you down the slippery slope Morgan Yu finds himself faced with when confronting the types of experiments and atrocities that took place on the space station Talos 1. And this running theme doesn't just apply to Morgan. You, the player, have some fairly tricky decisions to grapple with as well. Yeah, Morgan Yu and you, the player. The alien threat aboard Talos 1 is called the Typhon, and they're this incredibly malleable, fluid, almost impossible to contain organism. Early on in the game's story, it's established that if even one of these specimens were able to reach the surface of the Earth, it would practically be game over. There would be no coming back. There would be no way to survive, because once they're out there, they're just going to multiply exponentially. And mimic. You can't track these things down. Once faced with that kind of doomsday scenario, you have your pick of several less than ideal ways to attempt to rectify this situation. If, like me, you decide that there's no potential benefit that could possibly outweigh the risk of the extinction of the entire human race on Earth, you might be inclined to begin working towards the solution to blow up the entirety of Talos 1 and all of its inhabitants. Just the nuclear option, we've got to make sure this worst case scenario never comes to be. However, if like me, you decide that's probably the good option here, this poses an interesting conundrum when you start encountering and interacting with the few human survivors left aboard the space station. How much does their plight matter when you're working towards an outcome that would ultimately result in you and everyone else going down with the ship anyway? How do you treat them when you have the idea floating around the back of your head that they're all about to die anyway, they're just on borrowed time? When you find a crew member suffering from chronic pain and on the verge of death, do you bother to seek out the medication that would cure their ailment when you're just delaying the inevitable? Especially when searching for those medical supplies are going to cost you your finite time and resources, because at the end of the day, Prey is kind of like a survival-esque game after all. Ammo and supplies are not exactly abundant. Do you aid the escape pod launch that could potentially save a couple crew members? Or do you intentionally sabotage it and thereby killing the crew members aboard that escape pod because you can't guarantee there are no shape-shifting Typhon aboard that escape pod? You'd be risking so many lives if that thing makes it to Earth. Do those dilemmas even matter? I mean, you're just playing a game after all, right? How much weight do you even put behind these decisions? It's not going to matter, right? Right? So Prey's thesis is that all of these intense, emotional, mortal choices can't be boiled down to a simple math equation when all of the numbers in the equation have these human faces attached to them. It's hard to prioritize the needs of the abstract masses on Earth when there's this NPC right in front of you you've already built this rapport with. They've meaningfully helped you, and they need your help in return. Do you ignore them or not? It's kind of a tricky situation to navigate. So that's my philosophical take on Prey, and that is to say nothing about Arcane's signature level design and wildly diverse possible gameplay styles. Telos 1 is designed to be this real inhabited place, in addition to being a cool setting for a video game. Even the concept of fast travel aboard Telos 1 is handled in this realistic manner. You go to an airlock and head outside the station and quickly zoom across in zero gravity to a different airlock which is closer to where you wanted to go. So that's pretty novel. It adds this level of physicality to this actually existing up there in Earth's atmosphere. And don't even get me started on the ending to Prey. It's superb.
There's multiple endings, right?
There are multiple endings. There's some doozies out there.
Doozies.
Prey is superb. I would call Prey essential to anyone who isn't deathly allergic to immersive sims. If you can stomach them whatsoever, give Prey a shot. And that's all I had to say about Prey, but that leads me into my ever so brief public service announcement.
Oh?
It's about second chance games, because 3 of the games on this list I bounced off of really hard and really fast. That was Prey. I didn't like it. That was Hollow Knight. I tried to play it 4 times and it just never clicked. And that was also Breath of the Wild, which I put down for a whole year before revisiting it. It's a tricky line to walk because on the one hand, people can fall into the sunk cost fallacy where they're like, I paid good money for this game. I'm going to force myself to see it through to the end. And you're not getting your money back. You're just wasting your time at that point. And I don't encourage you to do that. But also, it can be hard to get a sense of what the game has to offer in the first hour or 2. So you've got to figure out where your breaking point is. Because if I had listened to my first gut instinct, these 3 games, which are some of my favorite experiences of the year, wouldn't have made it on the list because I would have abandoned them. But you also don't want to force yourself to play something you're not liking. So just be cognizant of that when you're out there. Figure out what you're in the mood to play and try to give everything a fair shake.
Well said, Chris. The PSA, that's a really important snippet that if we could just distill this episode, that's probably a really important point. Yay, Prey. Yep. What can't be said? I like what you said. If you're not deathly allergic to immersive sim, good. Yay! All right, that was number 4.
That was
my number 3. We are down to the top 3, Chris, and you knew that these games are going to show up, and it's just a matter of the order. As if it kind of makes a difference whether or not it's 3rd or 1st. Number 3 was Transistor for me.
Okay, I've been waiting for that one.
Yes. Transistor, a beautiful game. Easy to lose yourself with the music, the moment. With the challenges that you can do. I did a few of those little Mind Palace. What the heck is... Yeah, just the Transistor challenges where you...
That's the place where there's a beach ball, right?
Yeah. Your job is to try to kill all these enemies in one go or survive the time limit. And same goes for the actual mission levels. Or excuse me, wasn't there a New Game Plus too?
Yeah, where you retain all your abilities and you can like double up on the same ones
Yeah.
as you progress through the new game plus.
Yeah. So the gameplay is well spoken for. There's so much that you can do, and it's not like you can do it really anywhere else other than other Supergiant games. And the story, I was really captured by the story. I think I mentioned it was like one of the best stories of all time. I might walk that back just because it's a very well-structured, small, these characters you really empathize with, and like this world is so curious. When I found out the fate of some of the members of the Camerata, I was like, oh, that's not where I thought it was. I thought it was going to be villain of the week, and we just like power through each member is like a chapter. But
yeah, that's a good observation.
Yeah.
They're very much not villain of the week.
Yeah. So, I mean, good on the game. It was, I knew it was going to continually escalate with the process taking over, but I was so satisfied with the buildup and the ending, even like the boss battles with like the spine. Were still quite thrilling. I describe Transistor. There will be enemies that can take you out of that time freeze moment called turn, or you can get caught up in the enemy's attacks while you're waiting for turn to recharge. And the main emotion I got from Transistor was the anxiety you feel of, bad play. I gotta scramble. I gotta find a way to circumvent these obstacles, and it's what a interesting puzzle. Maybe this is rose tinted glasses because when did I play this? Early in the year,
around the middle point, I think.
Man, what? Why do I think that everything in like June and July happened in February?
I could be wrong. I could think you just played all your games in the summer.
Who knows? Remember, I called the episode from 2 weeks ago yesterday.
Right.
In conclusion, it is criminal that I enjoyed Transistor so much, and I haven't even touched any of the other Supergiant games, as if those are not equally quality pieces.
That's partially why I didn't put them on my games to force you to play, because I feel like you're going to seek them out on your own.
That's right. I intend to seek them out. So Transistor gets my number 3. Just because the 2 games above it held a little more special place in my heart, but is definitely a recommend for the hardcore types.
With that now known, I think I know what your number 1 and number 2 are, but we'll find that out shortly, because my number 3, and this is one I don't think you'd be able to guess, Heath.
Oh, really?
I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Slay the Spire is straight fire. So I discussed Slay the Spire on a single lonely episode of the podcast this year, and that is criminal. It deserved more than that. The reason is it's kind of a tough one for me to find things to talk about. There is no story in the game, and all of the game's really cool moments are these incredibly mechanically specific custom deck combinations I've assembled that no one's going to understand unless I give you my entire deck list. It's tough to talk about. That said, it's a game I've quietly been playing in the background as a filler game between the other big games I bring to talk about on the podcast. Slay the Spire could be an evergreen game for me. The variability of the deck building card game combined with the randomization of a roguelike creates this endless well of content to explore. I've put about 23 hours into it so far, and admittedly, I have only begun to scratch the very surface. Every time you have a successful run with one of the 3 characters, you unlock the next Ascension difficulty level, which will make subsequent runs incrementally more challenging. I know there are 20 different Ascension levels to unlock for all 3 of the playable characters.
Wait, how
so that's
many?
a
What?
minimum. 20 Ascension levels.
Oh.
So even if you never ever fail to run, which you are going to fail because this game is tough, that's 60 runs to do all 3 characters. And I know that there's this 4th free playable character coming down the pipeline who is also going to be very different. And that's not even taking into consideration that there's this daily climb challenge you can do that introduces all sorts of ridiculous and entertaining rules modifiers for a specific run, and that daily climb challenge gets swapped up every single day. So there's always novelty to explore there. Any way you look at it, if you even slightly enjoy strategic card games and hunting for deck synergies, Slay the Spire is this absolutely generous package filled to the brim with clever ideas, and I can't recommend it highly enough.
Yeah, the key word there was generous, because isn't it like a pretty cheap game for just the amount of depth that you get out of it?
Absolutely. Like full price is like $20 and it's routinely on sale around the $10 region. Yeah. It feels like I stole from the developers.
Very good. So that was your number 3?
Yeah. Hey listeners, this is Chris in post-production. So originally, when naming my number 3 game I played this year, Slay the Spire, I misspoke and actually said Into the Breach. I ended up cutting that section because it was pretty confusing to listen to, but the following bit of the podcast references it, so that's the context you need.
What, Into the Breach came out in January? And you were like, well, it had a 2-year early access. No, we were talking.
Oh no, that was all Slay the Spire I was talking about.
You Nostradamus my next game, because Into the Breach is number 2 on my list.
I thought it would be, which all but guarantees what your number 1 is.
True, yeah. So Into the Breach, what can be said? Despite how much praise you levied upon it, I scrutinized that praise, thinking like, oh, how good could it be? It's so well tuned. That's just the best way to say it.
Agreed.
You only get 3 units, and boy, it was so the skill floor is pretty high. You gotta be able to figure out certain efficiencies. Otherwise, you'll be overwhelmed or start to fail objectives that really just fuel your late game. If you don't have enough upgrades by the time you get to like the 3rd and 4th island, you're really going to struggle. But when you start to jive with it, Into the Breach is such a fun, I'm just fist pumping some of these amazing plays because I'm so smart. And the music is I really like the music. You mentioned it during like your first impression. Still have yet to explore all of the pilots, all of the upgrades, but it's basically more fun chess, which is something, it's so weird that we have all of these like super in-depth games with like train derails and stealth sequences, but I really just like this mechs versus aliens chess.
That's funny. Although you can derail a train and Into the Breach as well.
Oh, that's true. Well done, Chris. Yeah.
Those train protection missions are a pain. Jeez.
A major challenge. Yeah. Same goes for like the don't kill the volatile Vec.
Yeah. Big time. Okay. My number 2. Into the Breach.
Yeah, that's what, yeah. You Freudian slipped your 3 and 2, I'm pretty sure.
Ah, gotcha. Okay. So we are in, if we were to combine our lists, I guess this is the Mobius Tubes game of the year because it performed so well on both of our lists.
Fair to say.
So, much like Slay the Spire, Into the Breach is another turn-based strategy, repeatable roguelike that I would probably choose to bring with me if I was ever stranded on a desert island. So, why did I give the edge to Into the Breach here? I've played a lot of grid-based strategy games. Hell, I've played a lot of grid-based strategy games this year alone. It's a gameplay style I clearly love, and Into the Breach is the most thorough example I've seen of a game subverting the typical turn-based strategy genre conventions and tropes. It takes a genre that can occasionally be guilty of having bloated, unwieldy stats sheets and long, drawn-out matches, and distills it down into its bare essentials. A round of Into the Breach is just short and sweet. And most impressive of all, it manages this feat without sacrificing any of the depth. Some of the most engaging gameplay moments of the whole year for me have been starting a round of Into the Breach, being completely motionless, brow furrowed, as I desperately search for a possible move to mitigate a bad situation as much as possible. The intensity I felt during these moments of Into the Breach were as high, if not higher, than pulling off even the most flashy combos in Devil May Cry 5. It's just that engaging. And that is in large part due to what I perceive as this impeccably tuned difficulty balance. You said this game was finely tuned, and you took the word right out of my mouth.
Did you write that in your essay?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I did.
We're the same person.
We're on similar wavelengths here.
Yeah.
There is no other game in existence that I'd rather get a chance to look at what is happening behind the scenes in the source code than Into the Breach.
Oh.
Time and time again, I was floored by the game's ability to consistently present me with what initially seemed like this insurmountable challenge, only to eventually find some obscure solution that would successfully stave off complete disaster for just one more turn. And that's happening in this game that is supposedly extremely randomized. I'm telling you, there has got to be some technical wizardry going on under the hood here. Subset Games has wowed me, and you can guarantee I'm going to check out their first game, FTL, sometime in 2020. They've just made me such a fanboy with Into the Breach. Yeah, number 2 is well deserved.
An important thing you mentioned about the code, I could definitely see a world in which maybe it wasn't written as well. And there were moments in the game where you're like, oh, thank God the AI messed up. They were constantly coming up with difficult challenges. And there are varying difficulty levels, right?
Yeah, so I'm basically talking about the normal difficulty.
Yeah, that's all I ever played.
Because it definitely loses its tension on easy, and I was too much of a chicken to try hard. So there's definitely like room for me to grow and get better at the game. But I was just floored by, I'd like stave off the loss for a turn. It would ramp it back up, and the best solution is this one that takes some, it's not immediately obvious. It takes some like searching to like figure out how can I best manage this particular situation. And it just turn after turn, they come up with a different wrench they throw in your plans. It's amazing.
Yeah, we are huge fanboys. I think of all the games we've ever talked about, Into the Breach has probably been mentioned the most. I mean, Fallout 76 appears quite often. But yeah, we are such huge fans. And God forbid somebody like hates Into the Breach and they've just been had to
suffer through it all year long. Yeah.
All right. That was 2 through 10. So are you drum roll. Are we ready for my number 1? If anybody couldn't guess it?
I've got my guess in mind.
All right. My number 1 was Fallout 76. No.
Oh dear.
Disco Elysium. No.
Oh yeah. No.
It was Outer Wilds. The space exploration puzzle game that
you even said the right title.
Yes, I made sure of that. Not Outer Worlds, Outer Wilds. I was so happy with what I got. I did not see any gameplay whatsoever until I booted it up, which is rare. I just listened to the praise that the Castle Super Beast guys were giving it, and I knew what kind of game it was going to be just based on what they were saying. It's so curated. There's only 5 planets in addition to the one you're on, so it's definitely, those are the experiences that they have spun into orbit for you to explore as much as you like, and there is a lot to explore. You will go through, we're talking, okay, like other games where, Slay the Spire, you'll go through like a dozen or so runs. This game, you'll run through it. If you are fascinated with the mystery, you will just run through this like 30 times or so.
I imagine this game is really difficult to talk about without diving into spoilers.
Yeah.
I'll make you a promise, Heath. By the end of 2020, I'll have played this game and we can do a proper spoiler section on it.
Thank goodness, because a proper spoiler section, there is lots to talk about.
Lots of layers to unpeel.
Yeah. Although I never finished it myself, and I just watched the rest. Like I watched like 2/3 of it. I was amazed by what I saw. Like amazed. Crazy that this was their first game. Movies Digital.
We failed to mention it got snubbed pretty hard at the Game Awards.
I was actually kind of upset that Disco Elysium just bulldozed the indie scene.
Right. This sounds like one that's deserving of minimum one award out of this year. Geez, you couldn't. I guess, yeah, like they were both up for fresh indie game and indie game. If only there was some way they could have split the difference between the two.
I can hear the main overworld theme for Disco Elysium. It's like it's just it's. I've been negatively reinforced to dislike that theme now just because of how much it snubbed all the other indie games. So when I
watch me come on the show, episode 39 or something. Having played, this week I played Disco Elysium and The Outer Wilds. Outer Wilds, meh.
Oh my God.
Let's talk about Disco Elysium. It blew me away.
And it's funny to mention how you were like, oh, maybe we'll do a spoiler talk for Disco Elysium. And there really wouldn't, that would be like a 8-minute discussion, whereas opposed to Outer Wilds being like a full segment.
Interesting.
That's all I'll say. That's my number one. Like if you play one game from my top 10 list, I would say probably play Breath of the Wild, but my favorite was Outer Wilds.
Very good.
Find a game with the word wild in it. You won't be disappointed. Unless it's that bad Man versus Wild game where you can like drink your own piss out of a snake skin.
What a interesting gameplay innovation.
I'll send you footage.
All right. Shall we get to my number one?
Your number one, because
you know what it is.
Yeah, I know what
Surely.
it is. Right?
Surely you do.
Yeah. As soon as you say it, I'm gonna know what it is.
Oh, do you not have a guess?
I mean, offhand, I'm only thinking of like, oh, you already mentioned Prey. You already mentioned Slay the Spire. Oh wait, no. Oh, okay. I just thought of it. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Got it.
Fire Emblem Three Houses.
Yay.
Yeah. Let me be frank for one moment and bring everyone down. If I'm being honest, 2019 was not my year by any objective metric you can think of. I've lived a very cushy existence. That said, 2019 was what I would call the relative low point on my journey so far, but it wasn't all doom and gloom. In the lazy summer days of August, there was this golden window of time that cut through the malaise and lifted my spirits. And if I'm being honest, playing through Fire Emblem Three Houses had a hand in that. My first foray into Intelligent Systems' long-running strategy RPG franchise is not one I'm going to soon forget. I will be the first person to tell you that Fire Emblem Three Houses is full of flaws you can nitpick. First of all, it's competing along with Vanquish and Minute for the ugliest game I've played all year. Like, you can't find a single environment in Three Houses that doesn't look drab and straight out of the previous console generation. It's like very jarring. Also, the writing has been heralded by critics as being of a very high quality, which for the most part I do agree with. However, what I haven't heard them mention is that there's this inconsistent nature to the writing, especially when some of the characters belonging to the nobility.
Wait, can we role play a little bit? All right, I'm going to be a character that hates magic. Oh, man, the sorcery students are practicing outside my window. Ugh, can't stand the sight of them. Wouldn't you agree, Chris?
Indubitably, good sir.
All right. Let's take 5 steps to the right, and now I'm like the wizard professor. Chris, you're coming along great with magic. Isn't it so sick? We use spells and stuff.
I wasn't prepared for this segment.
No,
I don't know what you want me to go for.
No, because freaking the anecdote that I'm recalling, you were talking about the writing, right? How like in one segment it's like, the nobility, yeah, hell yeah, I love war all the time, and then you go talk to Klaus, like who's like within earshot, and it's like, oh yeah, I kind of just I don't really care about the war, and then the discrepancy, yeah, that's what I thought you were referring to.
That is a good point to bring up. That wasn't even what I was referring to. How that your character's opinions can change rapidly just to min-max your character stats and relationships.
Yeah.
What I was more getting at is actually like the actual quality of the writing can fluctuate, especially when like the members of the nobility are trying to come across as being so sophisticated and using flowery prose. The writing can dip into the realm of being like cringeworthy.
Oh, okay.
And honestly, the most damning thing I can say about Fire Emblem Three Houses is that the actual turn-based battles were very often devoid of like real tension or real stakes, at least during my experience playing on normal difficulty.
The first half, yeah. Oh, yeah, the difficulty. Yeah, you can't play on normal.
Yeah, they have since post-launch released even harder difficulty settings, so that's commendable. But my experience, I never was concerned about losing. It was like mostly a cakewalk during the actual battles. But with all of that negativity out of the way, let me just say that those drawbacks barely even registered on my radar. When I was playing through Three Houses, it managed to elicit pure, unadulterated, childlike glee. The number of games I can say that have had that effect on me is shockingly small. It's like in a very exclusive group.
Handful, yeah.
It felt like waking up and running downstairs to open presents on Christmas every single morning for the entire month of August. It was it was crazy good. I was completely endeared to the cast of the Golden Deer House and fully invested in their narrative arc. Claude is just the best. He's my favorite video game character I met this year. Oh. And he's in great company, too. Hilda, Lorenz, Raphael, Petra, and Dorothea are all equally delightful. And while I would claim that Three Houses was rightfully not up for nomination in the Game Awards Best Narrative category, if, hypothetically, a category existed for Best Narrative Moment, then I would argue Three Houses has some heavy-hitting contenders that would be right at home in such a category.
You're referring to, like, the reunion?
That's a good one. There's also, like, there's the big twist that comes around the halfway mark, and some things that happen towards the end of the game as well. And that brings me to the progression. The progression system in this game is so layered and comprehensive, they sucked me in and never let go. Between Three Houses and the Persona series, something about managing a daily life schedule simulation is straight up crack cocaine to my brain. Squeezing every ounce of efficiency out of Byleth's limited allotment of free time each day is every bit as rewarding, if not more so, than actually successfully completing the battles in this game. I'm floored by the fact Intelligent Systems went so far as to include enough content across all the routes in this game to essentially amount to like 3.5 lengthy single-player campaigns. My Golden Deer playthrough was a 90-hour ordeal, which alone makes this the most played game of the year for me by a significant margin. And the extent to which they made all of the game's routes unique and varied, yet self-contained, is commendable. In conclusion, Fire Emblem Three Houses was the game that had me most invested all year long, and for that reason, it gets my number one spot.
Beautiful, Chris. What you were saying about how, despite the challenges this year, you really found a lot to get out of Three Houses. Yeah, they did trifurcate the story into three pathways, and we talked about that, how it would have been like a more solid experience if they just combined them, but
merits to both approaches for sure.
Yeah. All right, so I was definitely surprised by your Breath of the Wild placement, and then Devil May Cry I knew it would be there, but
barely.
Yeah,
made it to number 10. I was shocked by Minutes inclusion. I was also surprised by how highly Breath of the Wild placed. just because, you didn't have time to get really deep into it.
True.
But I guess it left a very positive impression in the first 10 hours. And also I thought Red Dead 2 would definitely be in the top 5. So it just missed that.
Just missed it, yeah.
So that brings us to the final segment of Mobius Tubes this year.
All right.
Which is the email section. We haven't done one of these in forever.
Yes, reminder to all, if you want to send us some mail in 2020, all you need to do is go to mobiustubespodcast@gmail.com. We will read anything we get.
Yeah, we're on the record saying we'll read your email, no matter how horrendous it is. And here's an example of that. Here we go. Subject line for this email came in all caps, titled, Streaming Overloads. Hello, Heathist and Chris.
Ew.
Yeah, I don't know what he was going for there. Anyway, Disney Plus was released and continues to dominate the market with countless subscribers, making Netflix, Hulu, and Amazon, this is graphic, slowly piss themselves in fear.
I watched Disney Plus last night.
So you've got context for this. Very good. Do you think, as a major player such as Disney coming to the streaming competition, opens the door to more companies entering the ring for streaming games with a more monthly payment plan monetization method? Google Stadia has done a great job creating their platform, but it is not nearly as popular as they were originally projected to be. Do you think Microsoft and Sony will follow suit? Side note, try to show some more emotions, Chris. I feel like I've been emotional this
Oh my
this
gosh.
episode.
Yeah, you friggin' opened up about 2019. Yeah, you absolutely. Yeah, and yeah, you're enthusiastic about Hollow Knight. Yeah. Wow. Who sent this?
He redeems himself. Hashtag Team Chris, down with Heath. Thanks for not sucking. He titles this email as The CEE.
Okay. What a menace.
Yeah. I was tempted to maybe not even respond to his email. He treated us like crap.
No, it's a good question. Streaming overload. I mean, short answer, yes.
He's got a couple questions here. I guess we could speak to Google Stadia not living up to its projected metrics, and also what do we think Microsoft and Sony are doing?
Yes. Okay. So for those of you who don't know, Google Stadia, you sign up for the service and then it'll basically run the game at their servers and beam the footage to your screen. You'll press a button and then the signal's got to travel to the server and then back to you. So there is a little bit of latency, and the resolution you get is determined on your internet speeds.
The advantage of this, of course, being since the game does not need to run locally, it's running far away in the server farm, you don't need any beefy hardware to play these graphically intensive games.
Right. And that's a benefit for people who might just want to try games rather than sinking hundreds of dollars on a console.
Exactly. And it's kind of a good thing we skipped this email last episode, because during the Game Awards, if you watched it, you noticed Google was hammering the Stadia ads throughout the show. I think I saw at least 3 of them.
Yeah, like Reggie Watts was a spokesperson for him. Yeah.
To be fair, like the production values of these ads, they're really good, pretty entertaining. However, with a friend, I was conversing about the Google Stadia ad, and I said, oh man, Google did a good job putting this together. And his rebuttal to that was, yeah, I was watching it with my girlfriend. It was a fun ad. What the ad does, though, it makes this big hullabaloo about, getting Google Stadia. You don't need to clutter up your entertainment center with that big bulky console. It's gone. Just get Stadia. And what it did was, it gave you a great sense of what Google Stadia was not. It did not give you a good sense of what it actually was. His girlfriend, who does not follow games, didn't know what Stadia was by the end of the ad, which was lost on me. Like, it's kind of an abstract concept, right? The game industry has been console-based and PC-based for 40 years now, and suddenly you don't need one anymore. So what are you getting in place of that? And it was unclear based on the ad. And it makes sense to us who are like deeply ingrained in this thing, but we're also the least likely to get this, right? Because we already have the hardware. This is not letting us do anything we can't already do. But that big mainstream market that maybe doesn't have the latest console, this is tougher to explain to them, especially in like a 30-second ad.
I liken it to record players. If you want to play music, you could pull out your vinyl record and put it on the turn thing and put the needle, and then you're listening to music. But I guess the record player takes up space and you got to maintain the vinyl and clean it. So there is hardware involved and there is little bits of maintenance that you got to do. Whereas streaming music makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
There's no fuss. All you need to do is, if you get like Spotify Premium or whatever, you just log in and then you're listening to music. Maybe it doesn't sound as nice as like a vinyl record, but it's satisfactory. But imagine if listening to music, the vocals were just slightly off beat to the background track.
Yeah.
Which is damn near unlistenable in some people's opinion.
Even the smallest of discrepancies would totally take me out of it.
Yeah. The same goes for streaming video games. If you're playing a fighting game and you tell Goku to punch with a button press and you have to noticeably wait until he gets back from the server and he punches on your screen, you're going to be disengaged instantly, or as much as if it were the music situation. But you're like, oh, that's the cost of not having to get a console. We're really, we're as a society, we're really tuned into getting hardware still. As ubiquitous as streaming has become, it's not going to come to games yet. It would take something as huge as like that tariff that we were scared of. And even, a Google Stadia. Oh, you disagree?
Well, I mean, it's not even a matter of disagreeing. It's just they've already taken steps to hedge their bets, we could say. Sony has the PlayStation Now service, which is a game streaming service. In response to Google Stadia coming out, I think PlayStation Now used to be like a $20 a month service. They've cut the price in half permanently. It's now $10 a month, which is probably a much more reasonable price. Also, Microsoft does not have a streaming service yet, but they have the Project X Cloud, which is a cloud streaming service, which is launching next year. So they've both risen to the occasion. I saw this article, which tells you a lot. It was from a Sony spokesperson, and essentially the TLDR of this article was in response to Google Stadia launching. The article said, Sony breathes a collective sigh of relief that no one cares about Stadia. So the traditional console manufacturers have taken the steps to compete in the streaming area, but I don't think they want the business to primarily transition in that direction. They're happy to keep milking traditional console sales for far into the future.
You know what I was thinking? Maybe there's like a half-seas service where the game is running on your console, but maybe the backlog is streaming to the console. And
what do you mean by backlog?
Oh, just maybe rather than the console having to render everything, maybe it could.
I see.
Maybe it could run what you're looking at, and then the streaming bit is like preloading stuff in the background, so like load times are cut in half. That's probably not how games work, but I'm just trying to make it so that there's like a device in the home and it's supplemented as opposed to being replaced.
No, I think that theoretical solution you envisioned is possible. You're talking about like the most time-sensitive components of a game where latency is killer. Those are handled all client-side locally. Mm-hmm. But then the big loading sections that are less time-sensitive are handled server-side off in the cloud. Yeah, that hybrid model could have some merit behind it.
That's the only solution I can come up with. It's not gonna... To think that by 2029 consoles will be the minority That's nah. Streaming's not that good yet.
Yeah, and I guess it's worth mentioning, I think Sony and Microsoft have the superior, or they're planning to have the superior streaming platforms based on what Google Stadia is right now. But Stadia does have one big advantage, that being Microsoft and Sony, I think you need their consoles to use the streaming service. So it hasn't eliminated the console purchase for you.
Right.
Google, that's a pretty tantalizing thing. You don't need to plop down more than $100 on a console.
It feels like we're in the era of hot air balloons. We're like on our horses, and then these guys are like, look, you can take to the skies with the Stadia hot air balloon. And we're like, I guess, but I could just ride my horse, and it's more reliable. You know, there's no gusts of winds that are going to take me to Connecticut.
I'd say that analogy worked better than it should have.
Yeah. And then what I'm saying is, after they work things out, they'll invent the airplane that is like solid game streaming. And then we will just stay at home all the time and just stream our games.
Can't wait. Well, we did it, Heath. We podcasted for all of 2019. I barely believe it.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, we did pretty well. We got 30, we got like 26 episodes in, which is...
Yeah, because there were 4 episodes.
Perfectly half.
Right. If we're a bi-weekly podcast, you would expect us to ship 26 episodes in a year.
Okay. That's commendable, I think.
I early on would not think we would have been doing this a year later, but I'm happy to see that we are.
Yeah, we found a way. Good. All right. What are you going to play in 2020?
Okay, my short list here. Red Dead Redemption 2, it's on the docket. Outer Wilds once it comes to Steam, you bet. I need to play all of these indie darlings like Return of the Obra Dinn and Disco Elysium, especially after it got 4 awards. Man, I'm sold. So I'm going to be playing all of those. Maybe return for the Yakuza franchise, because I know you would like to talk about that for sure. However, maybe you can't take any of what I'm saying at face value, because you asked me the same question on episode 4, what would I play in 2019? And I think the answer I said was, I'm going to play some of that Hitman reboot. And that didn't happen.
That's funny.
So what are you planning on playing?
I'm going to play Brain Age when that comes out. That comes out like January 3rd. I have like this whole bit planned where I'm going to live stream it, because I don't know about anybody listening that knows me. I was a STEM major all through college. You know, I took like, Chris, we took like AP Physics, and I took AP Bio. You didn't do that.
Oh, yeah. Heath has the intelligence of someone who could get through Return of the Obra Dinn without looking up any of the solutions.
Wow. Okay, that's not what I'm going for. But I'm saying how, were we in BC Calculus together?
Yeah, we were. You sat in the middle front.
That's right.
You would whenever that we had to do something on the graphing calculator, wouldn't you like plug it into the TV and plug the numbers in?
That's right. Yeah, I was Vanna Whiting. Yeah, the graphing calculator. Was that me? Yeah, wow. So once we got into college, so I should mention, I got a 4 on the AB portion of the exam, but a 5 on the BC portion.
Which is baffling.
I don't know what to make of it. So I didn't have to take any math classes in college, with the exception of statistics, but that's not math. That's just English. So
English.
Yeah. So I didn't take any math classes for 4 years. So my math is kind of struggling, and not to say that Brain Age is exclusively math. It's all forms of like memory games and did you ever play it on the DS?
I am.
Yeah, you didn't like it.
Brain Age. I've never played it at all.
Yeah, you're a Brain Age denier.
I can't even denier. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's gonna be my idea. Is I'm gonna live stream myself playing Brain Age as kind of a let's get Heath good at math again, because like the hallmark of that game is literally just the 100 question addition, subtraction, multiplication. Or no, it's like only a multiplication. Anyway. But we'll see.
It'll be like a check-in on how far have my math skills fallen over the past 4 years.
Essentially, yeah. There's no calculus in Brain Age, but it'll be illuminating to see. So I'm gonna play that. I'm gonna play the David Cage games with Bailey because they're on PC now. Then I'm going to play.
Well, I mean, the Givens. We've assigned each other some assigned reading.
Yeah, duh. And then whatever comes my way through Epic Game Store because I didn't have an Epic Game Store account when we started this year.
Right.
But wow, has that just been fueling this podcast?
True.
So that's what I got.
All right. And then we have a whole year of fun things coming up. Man, next year is going to be crazy. New consoles.
I'm looking forward to
Cyberpunk. It's going to be one for the record books. You can quote me on that.
Oh, really? Do we have a 2017?
I think we have a 2017 on our hands.
2017
really
was
do.
legendary. Are you serious? What? No.
I feel it in my gut.
Wow, exciting. Okay, that was episode 30. Thanks, everybody. Should we plug the Twitter? I'm gonna plug the Twitter for 1 second.
Sure.
Just at Mobius Tubes.
And we'll see you in the new year.
Yay.
Bye.